Hello everybody and welcome to your newest lesson from the team here at fullskillsexamprep.com. So if you're getting ready for the ICCRC exam, a big difficult part of that is the fact that immigration changes all of the time and you need to be updated on these changes because they'll play a role on your ICCRC exam and also maybe even in your life as an immigration consultant. So one of the exciting pieces of news today really is that there's a new pilot program that was just released today. So it's called the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Program. We're going to take a look at this in this video to make sure that you are covered. It's pretty exciting. It's always exciting when there's a new immigration change. But for you, I know it might be a little bit stressful for you if you're getting ready for the exam. So don't worry, we've got you covered. If you are taking the February 3rd, 2019 exam, this program will not be on it, simply because we're past the 90-day cutoff. However, if you are taking the exam May 5th, 2019, this program can play a role on your exam. So don't worry, we're going to work through the information about this program in this video. We'll do some simulation questions together, as we always do. And if you are working with us in the seminar, or if you're going to purchase our simulation exams, well, we will have questions on this in those as well, just to make sure that you are, of course, prepared. And, of course, the famous test day data booklet will include all the information you need for this program. All right, as always, we will take a look at this through three perspectives. One is basically, what does the government say about this? We need to know why they're implementing these programs, of course, and what the laws are regarding this program. The next one is with the ICCRC exam, and that's what a lot of you are worried about, is how is this going to play a role on the ICCRC exam? And we'll talk about this quite thoroughly today. And of course, I'll give you just some small business advice regarding programs like this throughout this video. All right, so this is the exact news release released by the government today. And you can see all this information in here. If you want to pause the video and read through this, you can. We are going to analyze every little piece of this because it leads us towards a lot of other topics that relate to immigration, that relate to the way that immigration programs are made, and of course that relate to what could potentially be on your ICCRC exam. So again, if you want to pause the video to read every word of this news release, go ahead. If you don't want to, we're going to work through every piece of this throughout the remainder of this video. All right, so something really interesting is when we take a look at even the first sentence here, well, we can see in our minds as RCICs, I think the general public would look at this differently and they would say, okay, great, so the government has a new program. For us as RCICs, I think we can look a little bit deeper in here. Now, we need to see if, of course, the government is living up to what they need to do in terms of immigration, right? How do we know what the government needs to do in terms of immigration? What are the government's goals? What are the objectives? Well, it's in IRPA. So IRPA Article 3, as we've seen, I'm sure you've seen this a lot of times, but it's great to take a step back and look at a new program like this one, and again, link it to the larger picture. Why is this program being implemented? Why did the government want to do this? Well, we can see with even this first sentence here, the Government of Canada is committed to supporting immigration strategies that will enable smaller communities to enhance their economic, social, and demographic vitality. Perfect. I agree with all of this completely. I think localized immigration is just fantastic, and I'm looking forward to even the future programs that they'll implement. So we can see that this links perfectly with Article 3, Section C over here, and that is, of course, the objectives of this act with respect to immigration are to support the development of a strong and prosperous Canadian economy in which the benefits of immigration are shared across all regions of Canada. So when you read even some of the news articles that I've got linked for you, I think it's pretty common knowledge that a lot of immigrants want to go to the larger cities. So a lot of immigrants want to go to Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, even though life in small towns, for a lot of immigrants as well, and a lot of your clients, I'm sure when they talk to you about Canada, a lot of them might say they want to go to Toronto. Sometimes it's just because they've heard of Toronto before. And other times it's because they understand the industries there and that type of thing. Other times you'll have people who are happy just to go anywhere, really. And I don't know if you've ever lived in a small town in Canada, but well, I have, and they're amazing. I think they're great places to live in, and for your clients as well. If it's something that your clients are interested in, well, this program, once it's completed, of course, will provide you with another option for those clients. All right, so we'll take a step back again to look at the IRPA, and when we take a look at Section F over here, well, we can see it says to support by means of consistent standards and prompt processing the attainment of immigration goals established by the Government of Canada in consultation with the provinces. So that is when we look at those numbers of immigrants that Canada is targeting. So if you remember, we took a look at this quite a few times already, but even if you take a look at the video on our website, the welcome video, well, we talk about the number of immigrants Canada is bringing in. It's 1 million immigrants over the next 3 years. So remember, this year is 330,800, and then it increases by just about 10,000 every year. All right, and of course, when we break down those numbers, we're looking at provincial immigration, federal, pretty much everything really. And of course, part of the goal of this new program is to help the government reach those numbers as well. So we'll talk about what those numbers are for this program in this video later on. Okay, and finally, of course, working with the provinces well, they talk about recognition of foreign credentials, but an ECA is almost always needed for this anyways. I can't think of a program actually where an ECA is not needed to verify someone's credentials. But anyways, the main point is the last part of that sentence: a more rapid integration into society. And we're going to see that these programs are very committed. Well, the plan anyways is very committed really to helping people integrate and succeed in their local community, rather than have somebody immigrate through this program and then of course move to maybe one of the large cities or somewhere else, right? You can see 3 dots between F and J. Those are just sections of the objectives of the Act that aren't really important in this lesson. Those ones deal mostly with inadmissibility and security and that type of thing, just in case you're curious. All right, so when we take a look at this sentence here, we have the Minister of Immigration, and basically he's announcing that a new pilot project was created. Can the minister do this? Yes. So just one example of one article that shows he's allowed to do this, of course, is here with Article 8, where he can enter into agreements with the provinces. Now, this isn't the only thing, of course, but with this, we could see that the Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship has this authority, and of course, it's part of his job to implement these types of projects. All right, so let's work through more of that news release and the information presented in there, because I think, again, it brings us to a lot of very interesting areas of immigration and areas that, of course, you can be tested on for the ICCRC exam. So let's take a look at the sentence over here. Now, that paragraph has quite a bit of information in it. We're going to break this down step by step. So you can see that it says this innovative economic immigration pilot is aimed at testing new community-driven approaches to address the diverse labor market needs of smaller communities. So if you saw even our introductory video on our website, we talk about this, and immigration is becoming more and more localized and obviously more specialized. And this news release, I think, really shows you the future of a lot of immigration, and that is, of course, community-driven approaches. So something really interesting in here is, of course, when we take a look at this new program or this new pilot project and compare it to the AIPP, so the Atlantic Immigration Project. So that was a total home run. If you've been following the news on that, people love it. I don't know if too many immigration consultants work with it yet, but it is a really great option. And if you read the news articles, well, it shows that the provinces are happy, the immigrants are happy with it as well. And it sounds like with this one, the government is trying to mimic that success in a different part of Canada. So if you remember, we talked about quite a lot of information in the AIPP lesson. If you haven't worked through it, you really should, of course. And the beauty of this really is that it was sort of a trans-provincial immigration program. So we have a lot of PNPs, of course, but this one was super interesting because I think it was the first time where the government actually implemented sort of a group of provinces with an immigration program that goes across those 4 provinces in this case. And with this one, well, it's following the same style of this. So it's pretty interesting and relates to, of course, the AIPP. So this next sentence is very important and very interesting for us. And that is because it tells us where this program is going to take place. And really, it's everywhere except for Quebec and except for the Atlantic provinces. So Quebec is excluded from this, and also New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland. All right, and this last one shows us the direction that we are, of course, looking at with this lesson and with the information that's presented right now, which is, of course, how communities can become accredited for this. All right, so communities can apply. They'll have to work with some different groups, and we're going to take a look at this, of course, in the next few slides to really take a look at how communities can participate in this program. So you can see on the bottom here, it says they have to demonstrate that they meet certain eligibility. And we'll talk about this very thoroughly. There's a lot of information released on this, and we will discuss every little piece of information for that. Now, we can, of course, take a few guesses at the requirements for the PRs. So the communities will have a certain requirement, and then the aspiring PRs will have certain requirements as well. So the government release said that that information will be released later in 2019. Obviously for us, we'll have a lesson on it right away when it's released, but we can guess a few little things. So I want you to take a second and think of what you think some of those requirements might be for PRs. Even though this information is not released, what do you think one of those will be anyways? All right, so I hope you said this, the intent to reside. All right, so we don't know any information of this yet, of course, but I'm almost certain that the intent to reside in the nominating community will be one of the requirements. And of course, if you work through that lesson, again, you're covered for a portion of this information that will be released later. And finally, the last little paragraph of that news release gives us, again, some really great information. So the section in yellow here focuses on mentioning to us that this program will complement other immigration programs. They talk about the AIPP and PNPs. Now, this goes with what we talked about before, community-driven, localized immigration. In the green part here, that's interesting as well because they talk about francophone immigration. So maybe there will be a francophone component to this project. Why would the government need to focus on this? Well, it goes with the objectives of IRPA. And we could see this with Article 3(1)(b) over here, where they talk about respecting the bilingual character of Canada. And of course, supporting and assisting the development of minority official language communities in Canada. So just in case that doesn't make sense to you, or in case that's something new for you, a minority official language would be, of course, where, in this case, they're focusing on French, where French is a minority language, because the official languages of Canada, of course, are English and French. And in the north or in the west, French communities would be often minority communities. Okay, and then when we take a look again at the yellow sections, which we talked about a few slides ago, well, we can see again that the objectives of this program are to meet the objectives of IRPA, which is, of course, to promote localized, successful immigration all across Canada. Now let's take a look at the general procedure for a community to be selected for this program. All right, so we have the local community now. We're going to take a look at this a little bit deeper and see what is meant by the term local community in the next few slides over here. Well, that local community is going to work together with a local economic development organization. So we're going to see what this means and what that organization does and what, of course, their responsibilities are in this program. Now, we're also going to see a couple of other players in here that will work with the local community. That is, of course, municipal leaders. So they would work with the local community in a lot of different ways. And in particular, with this program, we're going to see how they would play a role in this, and a local or regional immigrant serving organization. Now we're going to see that the local economic development organization is the one that is responsible for the application to the IRCC. And of course, they have some ongoing commitments that they need to do if that community gets selected and if that community accepts a PR through this program. So we'll take a look at all of these players and see the roles, see the definitions of them, see how they're interpreted, of course, and see what they need to do in the procedure for being selected for this program. But even if they are selected, what's their responsibilities after being selected and working through the process of nominating somebody to come live and work in their community? All right, so we're going to take a look at the local economic development organizations. Let's see what, because it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. And every time we're looking at immigration, every time we're looking at the exam, we need to see, of course, what the government's definition of this is. So we could see it on the website, on the IRCC website here. I've got the link for you on the bottom, of course. But this is what they say an economic development organization is in this context. So you can see that it's basically a group that promotes economic development. So this can be in a lot of different ways, of course. It can be larger, it can be smaller, as we can see in those 3 bullet points. An important point is the last one there, is the third one. Available resources to participate in the pilot, because you can have these organizations that are smaller and maybe they don't have the money or the funds or the people really to participate in this program. Now, when we take a look at the bottom here, so the top are, of course, mandatory requirements. So they have to have economic development as a central part of their mandate, and it has to be a strategic plan, of course, for economic development. And then, as we discussed already, those resources have to be available. Now, the other ones are examples, really, of what these economic organizations could be. So when I read this, I didn't know what a community futures organization was, so I had to look it up myself. It's pretty interesting. So what that does, it's a very local community organization in a lot of cases that will, for example, lend tools to somebody who's starting maybe a tradesperson type of business. They will support people really in starting economic projects. So it's pretty cool. Take a look at that website over there, communityfuturescanada.ca, to see what else they do. They have every province on there as well. It might even be a good tool for you to help your clients once you become an RCIC. I'm definitely going to explore this a lot further to see if it is something that can help our immigration clients and maybe even RCICs. Okay, let's continue on. So a Chamber of Commerce. I think a Chamber of Commerce is the most typical form of an economic development organization. If you are in pretty much any town, really, town or city, there often is a Chamber of Commerce, and they help organizations, of course, develop business. Okay, so it can be, they give another example, it could be another independent or not-for-profit development organization. When they say not-for-profit, that's an interesting one as well, because what we're thinking of course, is not an investor, really. So when we looked at the startup visa, for example, those are for-profit economic development programs for the most part, right? Where they're investing in a certain business with the hope, or the strategy, of course, that it will pay off for them. So they're specific with these requirements in the fact that it has to be a not-for-profit organization here. Okay, or a hybrid one. So this can be an organization of a municipality, so an independent board of directors, and then community stakeholders. So something, again, you can see how community-based everything is here. Now, there is another important element to look at. And this, of course, again, is just to reiterate the third bullet point here. The organization itself, other than the funds, they need to be willing and able to manage this program. Because remember, when we talk about the community, yes, the community is applying, but this is the group that is going to manage the pilot program. So, of course, they have to be able to do this. They have to be willing to do this apart from the money requirements, the financial requirements, as we previously saw. Okay, so what do they do with the application? What's the job that they have in submitting the application? Well, it's a pretty big one. They have to submit the complete application. So we're going to see this again right at the end, but they're basically liaising between the community and the IRCC for this. Okay, and we can see the second bullet point here. So this is all from the website that they will manage the pilot for the community. And again, I think it's a very important thing to focus on, is that when we say community, we are focusing on the community, of course, but it's this particular group that is running the program. All right, so in terms of the local community requirements, there are two areas we're looking at to begin with. One is the population of that local community. The other is the geography of it. How far away is this community from larger cities? All right, so they have a couple of options for us here. Now, when we look at the number of people, we can see that the first option is 50,000 or less. Now, and geographically, it has to be at least 75 kilometers from the core of a census metropolitan area. What is meant by census metropolitan area? Well, they give us a great definition on the website. And you can see over here, really, it gives it, again, it's really population based, right? So a census metropolitan area must have a total population of at least 100,000, of which 50 or more thousand live in the city core. All right, and then the second option for us is 200,000 people. But we have this complex idea, really. So the term be considered remote from other large cities. So you might think this is a little bit subjective, and I could certainly see why you might think that. Well, when we take a look at the link that they provide, and that's StatsCan, StatsCan tries to measure actually remoteness, and that's pretty interesting. In terms of your exam, it's not really something you need to know too much about, but I'll show you the website here. So they have a remoteness index. So they use all this different type of stuff to measure remoteness. And then they have a very, very easy section over here. And that is on the right side, eligible for the pilot. Pretty straightforward. So you can see that they have all these towns, really. As you move down the page too, it's Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, BC, pretty much everywhere except for, even as you can see in the description, except for Quebec and the Maritime provinces, because, of course, those provinces aren't in this program. So anyways, they give you a pretty easy assessment where they say, yes, this town is eligible for the pilot. Only in this context, though, right? We know that there are other requirements, of course, but in terms of the remoteness index and in terms of meeting the geography and population requirements, well, the towns where they say, yes, they meet the requirements are right there for us. All right, so what are the other requirements? Well, just a reminder again that we're focusing on these provinces here. Nunavut is an interesting one for this as well. All right, so you can see all these other ones here. And again, have job opportunities, economic development plan. As we saw before, the local economic development organization has to, of course, help with this process, and they're going to play a big role in it. Well, a community has to actually have one in order to qualify for this program. Okay, and then the ability to, of course, help people integrate. That's my favorite thing with this program, is that it seems like they're really, really, really focusing on integration. And if you read some of the reports and some of the news, about this program. There's quite a bit today because it was just released today. They talk about how really people who integrate into a local community have great lives in these communities. And how do they know that? Well, the people stay. They stay in those local communities, have jobs, have kids, and that type of thing. So how does a local community help these people to integrate better? Well, it's by providing integration services. So they give you some examples here: access to key services like education, housing, transportation, healthcare. All right, the big one in terms of course, economic integration, so getting jobs and that type of thing, mentoring, networking, and that type of thing is obviously incredibly important for people. You as RCICs, as well as future RCICs, you should have kind of a network ready to help your people as well, or just to direct them to a certain group or organization that helps with this type of thing. Because again, people who integrate have, I think, a better immigration procedure long term, rather than people who sort of try to figure it all out once they arrive. Okay, so back to those community leaders. What do we need from them? Well, for the application, we need simply letters of support. And again, they talk about the local leaders of the municipality. We also need, as we saw before, letters of support from the local or regional immigrant serving organization. And then you can see the last thing they say on the website is that they encourage French-speaking towns or populations, communities, to apply for this. So again, promoting francophone immigration in other provinces in Canada. Okay, so in terms of the application itself, well, what does the local community need to do? Well, we can see over here. So they have to be actively involved in attracting new immigrants, matching new immigrants to jobs. So the whole integration aspect here. And personally, I really hope that immigration focuses on this more and more and more, because it sounds just fantastic. And when you read some of those interviews with people who move to small communities in provinces, sometimes even places they've never heard of, sometimes places we've never heard of. Well, the interviews that I've read are very positive, and people love it. I'm thinking of Steinbach in Manitoba, which was one of the first, if you have time to research it, it's very interesting. So it's one of the first local communities to actively pursue immigration to help with the town. And it kind of started this whole localized immigration series, really, that we're looking at every year. And I don't remember the statistics, but I think Steinbach has a huge Filipino population. And Steinbach's this city that has 48,000 people. It's about 70 kilometers from Winnipeg. And yeah, it's kind of an unlikely place to have such an incredible, diverse population, but it worked because, of course, they had a lot of integration projects ready for people. All right, so back to the exam, of course. Well, the local community promoting a welcoming community for immigrants is, of course, essential. And how do they do that? Well, by connecting people. They give you an example. They're connecting people to members of the community. Okay, so as we carry on here, there are some joint considerations as well, where the local community as well as the local economic development organization have some shared responsibilities for the program. So you can see right at the beginning, it says if we choose your community, well, the community and the economic development organization will need to, and then they give us this whole big list of things that they will need to do. Okay, so they need to really organize who is actually a key player in this community. Who would be willing to mentor new immigrants? Who would be willing to support these new immigrants by providing jobs, by helping people with their integration aspects, right? Okay, and when you move on to the fifth bullet point, I like this one as well. I think it puts the onus on the local community, as well as when I say local community, I mean, of course, the economic development organization as well that's helping them in promoting the program to people who they want to require, and of course giving them a lot of really great influence or power, I guess, in recruiting who they want to recruit. So this would most likely be focused on, again, businesses that need workers, right? So that's usually the way that these types of programs work, and you can see it as well. So they want to consider, of course, the economic needs of the community and the employment opportunities for them. I like that they use the word genuine employment opportunities, because sometimes people, I guess sometimes organizations or companies or people themselves sort of just want to figure it out while they're there, but once they arrive. But of course, having a genuine opportunity for a person to work is a perfect match for this program, and having an employment opportunity that is a really good fit for a person, of course, makes integration for that person, for their family, much, much, much easier. Okay, we can see recommending those candidates for permanent residence. And remember, when we look at this, the federal authorities obviously have the last say in this. But just like a PNP, just like any PNP really, the local community can recommend who they want for PR. Okay, and working with partners, preparing for the person's arrival, of course, and developing that strong support network. Okay, and then they talk about integration again and again and again, matching newcomers with people who can help them, really. So people who can help them integrate better. Settlement services, established members of the community, and then they give those examples again: housing, education, transportation, healthcare. The last one is a very important one, and that is, of course, to monitor these people. How is this program working? Now, again, this is a pilot project. So the AIPP, the Atlantic one, was such a success that they're trying to, as we talked about before, they're trying to mimic those results in another place in Canada. Well, they always need to keep, of course, very detailed statistics and information about this so that they can improve, and hopefully lead this into more and more places in Canada, which would be amazing, right? Because localized immigration is, well, it's fantastic. Different places in Canada need different types of people. All right, so just to go to the procedure once more, because it's you have a different perspective of this now. So we saw this earlier, and we can see that every group in here plays a very, very important role. So we have the local community, and remember that they have to have the support of the municipal leaders. As we saw for the municipal leaders and also the immigrant serving organizations, support is shown through letters of support. Letters of support, of course, represent that the person or the group, of course, is going to provide support to the community, to this person. Now, the community has to work together with a local economic development organization. So we saw quite a few examples of that. The common one, most common, I think, that a lot of towns have is a Chamber of Commerce. Now that, let's say a Chamber of Commerce, for example, is going to handle the application itself. And of course, we saw all of the follow-up work that both the local community and the Economic Development Organization need to do in order to make sure that they are, of course, abiding by the requirements of this program. All right, so we've seen basically who does what in this application. And even after the application is accepted, what are the responsibilities of each party? Well, to finish this, so this is the second last slide, let's just talk a little bit about what is on the application itself. It relates to everything that we've discussed already. So we can see that there are 4 elements here, really. One is the community interest form. Now, this is basically about describing what the community has or is, right? So what's the population of it? How far are they from various other cities? What's the economy based on? How is the economy? What types of businesses are there? All that type of information. Okay, so they need an economic development plan written in the last 3 years. So cities often have an economic development plan where they are planning for the future, planning how to get businesses into the city, planning really what they expect the tax revenue to be, and all that type of information. So if they have one that's been written within the last 3 years, well, they need to include this, of course, with the application. Those letters of support, like we discussed before, and then they give you some optional information. And if you work in immigration, you know that optional isn't really optional. You want to make anything that's optional, you always want to include because you want to make as strong of an application as possible. Well, those optional elements anyways include letters of support from major employers and community members, and some more demographic or economic data. All right, so with this one as well, there's a pretty important part here. And just because it's a pilot project, they are accepting applications until March 1st, 2019 for this. Now, I would assume this is going to change as they keep refining the application itself, the project itself. But for now, this first round, the application needs to be submitted by March 1st, 2019. All right, a big thank you again for tuning in. It's always really exciting when there is a new development in immigration, because for all of you, even though we need to think of this in the context of the upcoming exam, well, you need to think of this in the context of your business as well. So maybe this will be an area that you'll specialize in. But in order to get there, we need to make sure that you become an RCIC and that you pass the ICCRC exam. So you did part of this. We're going to look at this in the context of questions in the next video. And of course, if you are working through our material, you'll have questions on this to make sure, again, that you are 100% prepared for the big day. All right, have a great day, everybody.